In at number 10, we have got the Maywing, and there's kind of one main reason at why I'm putting this creature on this list, and it is that it's such an insanely fast travel mount. It is just inherently very OP in nature. Like, you look at this creature, you think of this creature, you think of really speedy travel mounts, and that is just an OP feature in itself, being able to travel around the map with that speed without having to go into creative mode and all of that stuff. And that's not even an option if you're playing on a server. That's only really an option on just a general single player server, and you probably wouldn't do it anyway because it kind of ruins the fun of the game. But still, just I was needing something to compare it to, and although obviously it's not going to go as fast as someone flying around in creative mode, it is going to fly faster than someone in a tech suit, and it's a lot easier to get than a tech suit because you only need to be level 19 to get the saddle for this thing, and then boom, like one of the easiest tames in the game, just trap it before you actually start knocking it out. That kind of goes for most flyers though, or even pretty much every Ark creature that's a knockout tame. It's just so much easier if you do. So yeah, that's the kind of method to the madness. And then you've got yourself a really great, really quick, speedy travel mount that's also a possible feeding trough, and it can gather berries as well. So just a nice little feature for this thing to have. Next up, we got the Thyla, and this thing kind of works for both PvE and PvP players alike out there. This creature really does pack a huge punch in damage department. It also deals the bleed ability, and it can scale any kind of wall or vertical surface, making it a prime creature for raiding people's bases on a PvP server or just in any given PvP scenario. They're also pretty decent on SOTF as well due to their high mobility, and they're not too difficult to tame on SOTF either, or really just not too difficult to tame in general. The only real difficulty is the biome they spawn in, as the redwoods can not be the friendliest of biomes pretty much all the time unless you're extremely lucky, so you always do have to be careful for these things, and like microraptors and all of that. And there are loads of things that want to kill you in the redwoods, but you know, at least Thylas do spawn there, and you can get a lot of great use out of these creatures. So I really do recommend taming one, and I really do think they are extremely OP. The only thing that could make them even more OP is if they were actually allowed into bosses, because when these things came out, they were seen as too overpowered, so then they didn't get the ability to go into bosses. But now with some newer creatures, it's kind of a little bit outdated in the sense it's actually why the Giga is not on this list. It would have been. This was maybe like 2020, 2019, 2018, but that creature is significantly more outdated nowadays than the Thyla, so, you know, that's why that creature is not on the list, if you were ever wondering at any point. But you can see actually this bleed ability in just a second here. I used to not really know what it did. I just thought it was cool, but it deals damage on a percent base scale instead of just a general damage dealing scale. So no matter the health of the creature, it will always deal the same percent amount of damage, which is why the bleed ability is so OP. And really, if you do have the time, tame yourself a Thyla. You are definitely not going to regret getting one of these things. They are totally worth it, and considering they spawn on the island, they're extremely accessible to like every single Ark player out there without fail whatsoever. Next up, we have got the Theory, and the reason why it's on this list is not just because its saddle was unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
But purely that this creature is an insane gatherer of so many kinds of resources, including fiber, which is actually one which is considerably harder to get than most other resources in bulk with a creature like this, as most herbivores will just gather berries, whereas this thing can gather berries and fiber, and it's also a pretty OP boss creature as well. It really does deal a lot of damage and pack a punch. You could probably tell it would deal a lot of damage in that kind of general area, because look at how large these things' claws are. And when you look at it, it's, I kind of call it the Freddy Krueger of Ark, if you will, or the Tickle Chicken, just depending on what context you really want. Those claws really do, again, pack a huge amount of damage into this creature. Really useful for the dragon boss fight on the island if you've never done that before, and the fiber gathering really does put them up another level for me, as yes, the moss chops is another great fiber gatherer. It really doesn't do all too much apart from that. I'm pretty sure it's really great at gathering organic polymer as well, but this is a much more OP creature and significantly more useful just to the general Ark player out there, and especially with that saddle level being so perfect, you really can't miss an opportunity on taming one of these things. They're also really great at gathering thatch and wood too, so there's nothing not to love about this creature. So I really do recommend you taming one of these things as soon as you can, really. Next up, in number 7, we have got the RG, and doesn't this creature really deserve to be on the spot for being just such a great PvE creature? And also, I'm pretty sure it's a really great PvP creature as well, although I don't really can think of too many uses off the top of my head for this creature in terms of PvP use, but you know, there are definitely still going to pretty much be all the same uses as for PvE players, as this is a really great traveling mount and it has a heck of a lot of weight, so getting metal from point A to point B, or even maybe to point C if you're feeling like it, will be really easy. And you can also pick up a wealth of creatures with this creature, which definitely does aid this thing in being a really great successful creature, because maybe sometimes with a flyer you do want to actually pick up some creatures like the Desmodus do not have that ability, although that creature is on the list for several other reasons which I think do put it higher on the list than this creature. It also does have a portable smithy as a saddle, so if you ever break a metal tool if you're out farming, well, the RG can just simply help you with that, as long as you have some metal ingots that have been smelted. Of course, you can't just use the normal raw metal, if you didn't know that already. I'm sure pretty much all of you did. There's not really a point to me saying that, but you know, just might as well, because I'm sure someone's done it before. Then you can easily repair all your metal gear, and they also do regen as well. If you quickly kill something and then eat that dead body, then you get a really nice quick regen buff, which is actually, it's pretty useful, and it's a lot more useful, and you'll use it a lot more than maybe you'd expect. Next up, we got the Carcharodontosaurus, and doesn't this creature just objectively have to be really OP? It's a hugely massive carnivore capable of dealing a lot of damage, and I also was going to consider putting the Titanosaur and things like the mech on the list as well. Actually, I might put the mech kind of here at this spot, because I kind of think it deserves to be here as well. Really huge damage dealing thing, but the Titanosaur is hugely outdated nowadays, and obviously you could kind of just chuck all the Titans here as well, although I really tend to avoid those more as they're not permanent creatures, although they still definitely do count as creatures. You can make them permanent, of course, with things like mods and all of that for the Titans, but you know, I tend to stray away from those things, and the Carcharodontosaurus is one of those more powerful creatures you can get. That's not the only reason why a creature can be absolutely OP, but if you go by sheer strength, then this probably is the most powerful creature on the list, you could say. Maybe some other creatures could be contested against it and to it, and you know, probably just have to get Cantex to do a video on that, and then there you go, you would get the answers. But I'm probably going to say this is the most powerful one. It's somewhat more difficult to tame than the Giga because there are a few more steps. I have a guide on my channel, I'll put it up here if I actually remember to do it, otherwise you can just search that. It's not actually too difficult, you just have to be aware for some things, because it can go quite horribly wrong if you don't do it right, and you're just going to be wasting a lot of time, which you know you probably don't want to do. But once you do have one of these things, you really are going to enjoy it. In at number 5, we have got the Shadowmane, and this creature is here because it is just so jam-packed full of abilities. You really can't deny this creature's absolutely hugely immense strength when it comes to pretty much anything in the Ark space. It is basically uncontested in size and mobility and all of that. There is kind of one other creature which is in the number 3 spot actually, which personally I think it's really OP, but that's for a slightly different reason. But when it comes to maybe pure mobility, this does have a lot more. Like, just look at how high this thing can jump. It also does have the hydration buff, which does play a huge part in having a really OP creature. If you have buffs, the Megatherium is another great shout as well, although not on this list. It definitely wouldn't be more OP than some of these other creatures. I think that creature is actually, yes, still while OP, maybe not one of the most OP, although you could easily put it on this list and have people agreeing with you. You actually may want this thing to be on the list, so I guess I give it a quick mention here. The Shadowmane is just so packed full of abilities though. It's got the hydration buff, it's got pack buffs, it's got all of it. It can charge up damage over time, and it even has natural armor. It really is a great OP creature. Next up, we have got the Reaper, and this thing kind of just had to be here, didn't it? When you think of it, it is just such a big, bulky, huge creature capable of so much damage. Is actually kind of a little bit absurd when you think of it, and it also really does fit into its map very well, but that's not what we're talking about today in this video. We're just talking about a creature that purely deals a lot of damage and also just has great mobility and is generally a really well-rounded creature which is capable of a lot of things. If this was able to go into bosses, then it would be even more OP. It can't though, which is kind of why the creature next up on the list, although maybe not as strong, has a lot of edge over this creature, although you can use it on extinction for the Titans, although the Giga and the Calcodonsaurus are the more preferable options. But with loads of new creatures coming out in mods in ASA, I know extinction is still not here yet, but there may be some other options which people may be kind of becoming more fond to. But either way, just in general terms, the Reaper is a really OP creature. Taming one on Arboration feels like an absolute slog, but a slog that I'm worth going through, and on Gen 2 it's ridiculously easy, so if you don't feel like spending an age going through a huge slog, then tame one on Gen 2 and they're really easy. But once you do have one, you really do feel on top of the world, especially if you do it on Arboration as a process. It's just significantly harder to get it done as on Gen 2. The actual process of taming is obviously the same. And in at number 3, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature literally does bleeder damage to bosses, which is kind of the main reason why it's here, as that is an ability which no other Ark creature has, and it really does make this thing a hugely more OP creature. The fact that it can do a percentage based damage instead of just raw based damage to boss creatures, it's an insane thing to have, and you can grip onto them and all of that, and it's just an insane ability to have, really. It feels like an absolute cheat if you go into bosses with the Deinonychus, because obviously you're also going to go with the pack as well. You're going to have pack buffs on top of it. There's just going to be buffs everywhere, and you're going to melt through those bosses so quickly. Obviously don't do the Titans on extinction with the Deinonychus, but for everything else these things work really well, and maybe not the Moda actually, because they're not particularly very good underwater creatures, although they still can do a little bit. Just, you know, maybe that's not particularly what they were designed for, so probably don't bring them to the Moda fight. They'll probably drown anyway, so really I wouldn't try that whatsoever. I don't really know why I'm trying to like convince you to not use these things for the Moda. I'm pretty sure you weren't going to anyway, but you know, I guess that segment happened. Also, these things take no fall damage, which is a nice thing, so you don't have to dismount just before you hit the ground, no matter, like, I wouldn't know when you fall from a higher place. Sorry, I don't know what sentence was trying to come out there, but that's never going to happen again. Either way, these things, great mobility, and although maybe their parkouring skills isn't quite as elegant as the Thyla solution, I still really like it, and it works, and once you get the hang of it, it really does act quite well. And at number 2, we've got the Desmodus, and this creature just kind of has to be here because it can go, no, we're not going to talk about that, it can go invisible in the night. It's not why it can go OP. My brain is in a muddle. The reason why is because Sanguine Elixir exists, it's a blood bag farm, and you can also pick players off riders with this thing, which is absolutely OP for given PvP scenarios. That's why it's not because it can go invisible in the night time. I can't even show you that because I recorded all this B-roll on the Wasteland biome, and then I realised that you can't set it to night. I probably should have gone to the Snow Dome or the Desert Dome, but I didn't. So, you know, but at least you know it exists. These things can also just grab onto walls, like the Tapijara, which is a nice thing. Just don't press E or the dismount button when you like this. Someone's done it before. Press space or whatever the equivalent button is on console. Not really sure, but, you know, these things, really OP creatures. Sanguine Elixir, absolute cheap for tames. A third of it done like that with a click of a button. And obviously the fact that you can pick people off riders with this thing, insane. Really great for PvP scenarios, and it's also really quick as well. And in number 1 we have the Rhinogonatha, and the reason why I say this is the most OP Ark creature is it really does feel out of place for just what it can do. The fact that this thing can pick up Rexes and Paraceratherians and all of that just kind of seems a bit out of this world to me, and although they're really useful in ASA at the moment because cryopods don't exist, still they feel really out of place in the general Ark game to me, and kind of maybe too far out of a league that they really shouldn't be going into. And personally, from my opinion, I would like to nerf the Rhinogonatha because I find it way too OP. Personally, also on ASA, I think it should be a little bit rarer. Not quite as rare as it is on just general normal ASE, as you can barely even find those things, but still, on ASA, I feel like there's a little bit of an overspawn there. And you may completely disagree with me on this, and you're happy to, and you can comment down below your thoughts, as I'm always happy to hear your thoughts on creatures like this. But personally, I come from a much earlier stage of Ark playing, from like 2015, 2016, 2017, etc, etc. going onwards. I did start playing in 2015, so I've been playing Ark for absolutely ages now, and I kind of really like those primitive feelings of the game. Obviously, the game has to evolve, and generally it will kind of just get easier, and there'll be some new, cooler, more OP creatures being added as the game progresses, but I feel like this is a huge step too far, and I don't really know what the Vasilasuchus, I think it is, will be like on Scorched. Maybe that will be even more OP than this thing, and I don't really like the way that this is all going, but it does seem to be quite popular with the general Ark player base, so I guess it's a working marketing solution for wildcard and snail games and those kind of people. But also with the like expansion pack, like extra creatures as well, that's like even more OP. I really don't like the route that it's going with these kind of creatures. Again, you're very happy to disagree with me, but personally I think the running athlete is too OP, and currently I think it's kind of the most OP Ark Tame out there, just no questions asked. Personally, really not a favourite of mine, but you know, that's my opinion on it, and I still do think it is a great creature. I'm not dissing it for any of that, just personally like way too OP. Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you the top 10 most insane Ark Tames because I just love them so much. So in at the number 10 spot, I've decided to put the Astradelphis, as I find this is just a really effective traveller to get around the map, and I really do like it for all of its element of speed. It really does have a lot going for it in that aspect. As you know, a creature like this, and a Tropognathus, that's another creature which I quite like, following the similar niche to this creature, because they both travel with insane speed. But I just prefer the Astradelphis just from an ability perspective, and getting element is so easy on a map like Gen 2, it really isn't that expensive to do. And I just love the creature, and I also find the tame methods a little bit simpler as well. I know it's not the easiest out there, but I don't really like to like chain bowler the Tropognathus. It's just a little bit of a pain in my opinion what you sort of have to do. I think you have to cast board at it. It's not as simple just trank out, so in that regard I do prefer the tame methods of the Astradelphis, which is usually why I go for it instead. Yeah, it's saddles unlocked at a later level, and technically it runs on more expensive things, but I find it attacks very effectively, and it travels at the speed of like just insane speed, really. Coming up next on the list, we have got the Raasclark, and I really do love this as a creature. It just has so much capability when it comes to everything. It can pick up a huge variety of mounts that you'll find across the map, from Rexes to Paraceratheriums and creatures like that. It's honestly insane what this can do in that department. You really wouldn't expect it, especially from a creature of this size, because there are some bigger flyers out there that still can't carry as much as this thing. Although maybe not my favourite tame, as it seems a little bit unbalanced in my opinion, I still really do love this thing, and it is, although an insane one, maybe not quite the one for me, which is why it's only going higher on the list. But I still really do like this creature. I don't want to be like, oh well, I don't really like this creature at all, because that just simply wouldn't be the truth. I really like this creature for all the elements that it offers, especially in its traveling capabilities. Its weight is great, its damage dealing is great too, and I really do attribute it for that. It does a very great job of it, and generally it is just a great mount to have around, and the tame method isn't too difficult. Coming up next, I've decided to put the Theory, as this really is the most insane fiber gatherer out there for me. I love the fiber gathering that this creature offers, and of course its saddle was unlocked at level 69.
Nice.
On top of all of that too, it is a great combat mount, and it doesn't just gather fiber as well. It is great at wood and thatch, and also any kind of natural material that you'd find of creatures like chitin, keratin, hide, and any sort of meat, as it can actually gather those, which can't be said about quite a lot of herbivores in the game. Obviously the moss chops is a great shout as well, but I feel like this is an upgraded one, although the organic poly farming isn't quite as good as on one of those. But I really do like this creature, especially if you're going for the dragon on the island as well. Strongly recommend these things, as the dragon has a particular disadvantage to herbivores, as it deals a lot of damage to carnivores with its fire breath attack, but not to those herbivores out there. In at number 7, I simply have to put the Crystal Wyvern, as I really do find this a very effective mount, and especially considering how easy it is to get this thing, at least for me, I really do think it deserves a spot. Yes, it is behind a level 60 cap, and you do need to knock out one of these crystal wyverns to get the primal crystal, but with a net gun it is ridiculously simple, and with a note run that level 60 is no problem whatsoever, unless you're playing on official, but I'm not one of those official players, and I think most people out there aren't really playing on official. Still like a little bit of a grind, probably about 2.5x is as high as I'll really go, which is basically just default single player settings. It really is not too difficult to get this tame, and you get that full wyvern experience with, in my opinion, better elemental abilities, which is why I really like this as an Ark creature. I find the Blood Crystal Wyvern is a favourite of mine. That ability that it has is just so much nicer than any fire breath or lightning breath or poison or ice or anything like that. And I've also heard the embers are quite popular among loads of you in the comments below as well, and that is a very splendid one too. Of course, this is a tropical one here because it sort of looks the most crystally. I think it's the nicest for the B-roll. Coming in next, we have got the Blood Stalker, and this is my all-time favourite underwater travel mount. I really haven't found anything better to do this same job. I just find it does just such a good job for what it is in terms of underwater travel. It is my favourite out there, and of course it is just a great travel mount all round too. But why is it so good underwater? Well, firstly, it can skate along the top of that, which is really just going to benefit it generally if it's trying to get out of some very sticky and dangerous situations. You can steal the aggros of the creatures, very nice in a not very visible environment such as the deep ocean, because really you can't really see down there at all. If you also have the scuba mask on, that kind of limits your field of view more than you'd probably want. And they actually deal a pretty reasonable amount of damage and are very mobile and sort of acrobatic in a way in the water. Same as on land too. I find they really do work effectively for land travel as well. That is sort of what they're more designed to do, but they definitely were designed with the underwater biome in mind, as it's the only real travel mount out there on Genesis Part 1, so considering there was an ocean biome on it, it really was made for all of those maps, and that's why it's such a good underwater traveller. In at number 5, I've decided to put the Baryonyx, as I really do find this an effective caving mount, and it's insane how easily you can get this creature, and also just generally how early on. I really have no idea when the saddle is actually unlocked for this thing, but I'm confident pre-level like 50 or at least pre-level 60 definitely. For sure, with a note run you can easily get up to the level of this thing in, you know, a matter of like maybe half an hour even, or less than that. Note runs are really OP. And then you can head to the swamp biome. I've heard on ASA you can also just head to any rivers because the spawns are a little bit bugged. I don't know if that's intentional or not on the island, and you can find them there. But I would go for the swamp biome just as a general, and if you can find one on the outskirts too that's a high level, that is really going to benefit you. And if you can find one just in a random river somewhere, that is also generally just going to benefit you. They're great cavers because of their size and the fact that they are very mobile. They can jump around and they can deal quite a heck of a lot of damage, and their health is obviously good enough to withstand all of the creatures that you'll find in the cave. They're also great as an underwater caving mount too, due to their great swimming abilities and that stun attack, which they of course have, which can stun creatures up to the size of a Megalodon. Honestly, great tames, and if you haven't tamed one already, it's a must-have. Coming in next, we have got the Reaper, and really, would it be a list like this? Sorry, I don't know why I'm confused with that word for a second. Without the Reaper actually being on here, the King of Ab. There really is little better than it in terms of integrating itself into a map so well, and just with such a crazy cool design that I think we all really do know and love. It is stood the test of time for sure, and I'm still using these things quite frequently, even on maps that aren't Ab, because they are just insane killers of so many things. It's like the Giga on steroids essentially. The Carcharodontosaurus is a great shout too, but I'm still really enjoying this thing, and I have been really enjoying this thing ever since it came out. I've only really tamed it on Ab as well, although I have done a bit on Gen 2 if I want to just get one quickly, and also if I want an R Reaper, then I'll use that Raasclark method that he has. It's a really great video if you haven't checked it out already, and if you want a Reaper easily, I would recommend that. But if you never tamed one before, go on Ab and tame one the original way like we ought to do it back in the day. It is far more rewarding in my opinion, and then once you get one you feel like the absolute king of the world. Their model design is insane. They're basically just a xenomorph from Aliens, and yeah, they are really, really cool. In number 3, I simply have to put the RG, as this is just such an effective mount for all things metal gathering. And although it's maybe sort of seems a little bit weird to put it above the Reaper, but honestly this creature has done a lot for me and it is insane. Again, just this creature is so great. Its saddle was unlocked in the mid 60s. I don't think it's quite that perfect 69, it might be like 68 or something, just out of that perfect range of course. And they are great flyers and great resource transporters, you could say. With their insane weight reduction on metal, crystal, and obsidian, it's 50% at least. I'm pretty sure it's 50%, but I might have to check on that. But again, confident with that. They can pick up a wealth of creatures too. With an Anki and a Dodix, you really can farm like any resource that a pick or hatchet could farm. It's sort of insane really what you can get out of the use case of these things. They can also pick a secondary creature up in their beak. Their saddle acts as portable smithy, so if you've gone caving in an arse race, maybe broken your armor, as long as you've got some metal inside of this thing, you can repair your armor and go to the next cave and you don't even have to go back to your base. At least that's what I do when I do caving. That's just the thing I do, I guess. The regen buff, which they also have, always does come in handy in my opinion. If you are too low, then you could simply kill something like a Dodo or a Listro, and boom, you eat that thing and you get so much regen. It is honestly a godsend. In at number 2, we have got the Maywing. This is really my favourite traveller out there, and honestly insane that its saddle is unlocked at level 18. You really can't find anything better than this at the level that you're getting it at, and really just better than it in general across the whole game, which really does home in the fact that the saddle was unlocked at level 18. It's insane. I would get to level of where you can get some signs and obviously trank arrows, which is level 21 for those, so be about level 21. I'm not sure actually when these signs are unlocked, but either way, getting there is very, very simple, and the taming method is very simple. Use a couple of signs, I think like 3 should suffice to trap it in an area and it won't be able to fly out of them, and trank it out, as long as you build the trap right of course, otherwise it will be able to get out of it. So make sure they're reasonably close together and that it can't walk out of that area. You're going to have to act quite quickly as well, but it really isn't too difficult, at least from what I found. And then you've got yourself a Maywing like that, boom. You can even start with a really high level, they don't take too many turns to knock out. You've got yourself the best, like fastest pretty much travel mount in the game. They also act as a portable feeding trough, they can gather berries too, and are reasonable swimmers as well, so they really do have a lot going for them. Insane their saddle was unlocked at level 18. It's honestly amazing. And in number 1, we've got the Deinonychus. This really does have to top my list. I can't really think of anything that is more insane than this creature, just for all of my general needs. While yes, maybe it doesn't fulfill those underwater needs, the Shadowmane would be a good shout there. I'll give it a brief honorable mention. Don't want any comments about I didn't include the Shadowmane on the list. It gets an honorable mention here, okay? Maybe it should have been on the list in my opinion, in a way, but you know, it's being left out because I think all these creatures are more valuable to me, at least at the moment. The Deinonychus though really is a king when it comes to boss fights, able to deal bleed damage to them as well by just grappling onto them, like you can see I'm doing to that Bronto there, and just absolutely shredding them. Especially considering they have the pack buff on top of this too, there really is nothing which can go wrong. The boss fights will take barely any time whatsoever, unless there's a certain minigame to it, like the Gen 1 boss fights, which might not be the best fight to bring these things in, as their health can sometimes be not the best for the longer fights. But as long as you have some health mutations on these things, I think you should be fine, and I've done it with Dines before, so it is definitely very possible. That is on Alpha as well, I should specify, not just the puny Gamma fight, but all the way up to the Alpha. I did all of them. I've also done the Gamma fight with Carnos as well, but I find they don't really work as well when you get up into the higher tiers of that boss. You don't want to be using these things for the Moda, but that's just generally obvious, isn't it? They're great parkour gods too, and they take no fall damage. How you tame one, you go to the Chalk Cliffs biome and you steal an egg out of a Dine nest, and then boom, you've got yourself that dying baby. Once you hatched it, then you're going to raise it. If you get a good breeding pair, you're all set. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. I really hope that you all did enjoy, as I definitely very much did enjoy making this one. As always, comment down below what is the most insane Ark Tames to you, and if you didn't agree with this list, then put your 10 in the comments below, and I know you watched the video to the end. I'll see you all later.